Sports and Brexit was always going to have a somewhat interesting mix when it came to it. After all, lots of British athletes tend to go and compete in Europe, and this can create a lot of potential logistical problems. Not only as you try to sort of, move your equipment into potentially into the EU, where you might have to compete, because again, you'll have to fill out all the forms and whatnot. And of course, depending on what type of sport you might participate in, depends how much equipment you might take. So skiing is a good one, for example. So obviously skiers have a lot of skiing equipment. They'll have to take that with them. Fencing is another one where you have to take all your your equipment, your gear, your clothes, your safety equipment, your electric equipment. It's a lot of gear to take with you. But of course, probably one of the most logistical intense sports there really is the F1. And if you've ever seen the F1 logistical preparation that goes into the F1 season by some of these teams, I mean, you can just see the picture on here. Some of these lorries are massive because they're not just carrying the car, they're carrying all the extra spare parts, extra engines, anything that team might need just in case. Because otherwise, they've got to really quickly run back to wherever their shop might happen to be, pick up that extra engine and run it back. Now, it's not too beyond the realms of possibility, of course, that does happen sometimes. But there are a couple of teams, some of them are based in the UK. I think it's McLaren, I want to say. Again, not an F1 buff, but I'm sure someone will correct me. But there are a couple of teams based in the UK, and that could cause problems if they've got to, well, shall we say, run back and grab an engine because maybe one's failed or something like that, and maybe the spare is not as also maybe failed. There's all kinds of stuff that could happen, but essentially it is causing very, very much a logistical nightmare for some of these teams. And it's not just the logistics, it's also the 90-day rule as well. If you've got engineers, etc., well, if they're from the UK, they're now subject to the 90-day rule for a year. So that means you now probably have to have maybe a double shift team to make sure that you can keep those extra engineers on rotation, or be hiring EU people, which again potentially also has some hidden extra costs in there added. So there's a massive problem when it comes to F1 and the nightmare it is facing when it comes to Brexit. And again, as it always comes back to, it is about logistics, moving stuff from A to B. So in this case, let's go cracking on with this. So you don't get your engines ready. Bit of the F1 pun there, because again, the finishing line's not too far away. Anyway, I'll stop. But as always, thank you very much to those people who do help and support the channel. Of course, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page, the One Off Donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, the One Off Donation link called the YouTube thank you button. There's the Buy Me Coffee link. And of course, there's the Pony Club down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. So, over we go to motorsport.com to have a look at them covering this. Oh, this comes with the title of the F1 pushes the British government to end the Brexit logistical nightmare. So earlier this week, Formula One CEO Stefano Domenicali, I think that's how you say it, and of course several of his team principals from British teams visited Downing Street for a summit meeting with the Secretary of State for the Digital Department for Media, Culture and Sport, as well as advisors to the Prime Minister. While the primary aim of the F1's perspective was to try and ensure that the government was well aware of the importance of the Grand Prix and the racing to the economy, with it bringing in over more than £10 billion in each year, other issues were also on the agenda. And one of the most critical has been the downside that F1 teams have experienced from the impact of Brexit in travel and logistics around Europe. So, as you can see, it's not just travel. It's not just that, getting from A to B. it's the fact that you're now potentially making it more difficult for European teams to come and participate in UK, you know, Grand Prix tournaments. So this is as you can see, £10 billion a year added to the economy. Is it's quite a big chunk of change. Um, they can see how important they are to try and sort of make sure that this continues, and make sure that how important, hey guys, we are actually to the economy. Um, we'll see what happens, but I don't know if this is possible unless the government is actually willing to be able to do a deal with motorsports. I think that's the only way this is really going to get solved, if they actually do some sort of uh, deal or alignment deal to do with F1 teams and the motorsports teams. I think that's the only way this can really be resolved, to be honest. But of course, remember, we've got a very pro-Brexit government. They're not still there. While they have talked to the EU a bit more in recent times, it's debatable to how far they really want to go and talk and to actually do that type of thing. But anyway, back to it. So speaking at the British Grand Prix, the Williams team principal, James Vowles, said the red tape that F1 faced in transporting its equipment around Europe has had consequences for both competitors and organisers when it came to try and finalising the calendar. We are doing a couple of hundred carnets at the moment to move items in and out, he explained. One of the restrictions that is imposed on us, for example, is that should we go to Imola, which we did, the items can get damaged and you still have to return everything back to the UK. Furthermore, in terms of the calendar construct, you can't go to the UK, Imola, Canada, for example. You have to go UK, Imola, back to the UK to clear the items under the carnet and then on to other countries. So there is a movement component that it just isn't helpful at the moment to the sport, including the optimizing of the calendar. Plus, there's the moment of movement of people as well, which is also difficult. So there's elements of more latency and lost time in getting through airports on both sides that there were previously. It is understood that these F1 teams have pushed the government to actually consider to try getting in place similar exemptions that have been allowed for musicians when it comes to them transporting instruments on tours. Now there are exemptions in place, added Vowles. It is a very good conversation, I think, and it's certainly, from what I can understand, the first time that we've engaged really well with the government. The government were really receptive to what we are. It's, of course, whether they actually do anything about it, that's the other matter. Like I say, they've got to go and negotiate with the EU and get that, get those exempts and negotiate that with the EU. But will they? I don't know. There's nothing seems to be really taking place about it, but we'll see what happens. So they understand where British motorsport is, and they are very supportive of it. And there are various items in place, for example, for musicians. I know it is one musical instrument there, and it is a little bit more freedom around that. But there are discussions on whether that can apply to motorsport as well. McLaren boss Zach Brown believes that any assistance that the government could make in helping F1 will be a very welcome to everybody. I think that it is great that Stefano pulled this all together, said Brown. The government is very supportive of F1 and recognizes how much it contributes to the economy and to the entertainment in the country. I think that it's more around the logistics and supply chain. If we can work together to free that up, it will make everyone's lives a bit easier. And that is really what it comes down to. It is about, once again, logistics. But can the government actually negotiate that? Can they go to the EU and say, look, we want to do sort of a side deal regarding to motorsports? So maybe motorsports have to sign one carnet for the year and that's it, maybe. Or maybe they can find a way to reduce the paperwork. But it's how do you then monitor that? How do you then ensure that things and all that has to be fleshed out in negotiations. So it's whether or not these negotiations will actually go forward, whether or not these will take place. We'll see. But I think certainly at this moment, maybe government, again, the government's in a massive load of trouble. And if it could do something like this, which I think it could do very, very easily, it could find itself in a bit of an easy win. Look at how well we negotiated with the EU. We've solved the motorsport nightmare, the motorsport logistical nightmare. Aren't we a good government? It would be such an easy win for them to do as well. So, would they do this? Are they capable of doing this? And are they capable, of course, of doing it potentially in less than a year? Because that really feels where we're coming up to now with a general election pretty much right round the corner. Um, we'll wait and see on this one. But I think that these difficulties for the motorsport are going to continue at least for the foreseeable future. And of course, I don't know what the EU stance would be on if the government came to on like if the UK government came to sort of discuss something like this. Now, ultimately, it would probably be in their favor as well because, of course, they have motorsport teams that compete in the UK as well. So obviously, there's trouble for them getting to and from the EU to the UK. It's the same almost logistical problems, but even more because there are more races in the EU than there are in certainly the UK. But we'll see. We'll see what happens in this. But I'm not expecting anything anytime soon. This has already been a problem that we've covered before, and even since then, about 4 years ago, since we actually covered this as an issue, there's been little to no movement. Good that they've gone and met with the government, and seems to me you've gotten little more nothing than platitudes because they offered you nothing concrete. Don't expect any of these problems to be solved anytime soon, to be honest. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below. There is the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There's the YouTube thank you button. And of course, there's the Patreon page down below as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, we'll see you all next time.